What's up guys, Asian here again with another PTS video, and today we're going to be going over stamina and DPS. Your front bar weapons might be changing going into Dragonhold. This is actually quite an interesting time. It's probably the best way to put it in endgame PvE, with a lot of people testing out a lot of different builds and a lot of different sort of skill combinations on the PTS right now. Not just me, but a bunch of people who main DPS are just on the PTS right now, just wailing away at the trial dummy with all bunch of different skill setups to kind of figure out what exactly is going to be the best setup going into Dragonhold. Now, there was a very good post on the PTS forums that kind of took a look at just how balanced dots are compared to spammables, and I'll put a link in the description below for that one. But in that post, basically, I believe it was Liquid Pony who did this. He basically did very simple tests, very simple tests that basically showed that dot damage is not really going to be outstripping spammables. So a lot of us have been playing around with basically maximizing our spammables and minimizing the amount of dots that we're running. So for stamina DPS in particular, we're really taking a look at your bow backbar dots. Still remains to be seen whether we're going to use Arrow Barrage or Endless Hail and Poison Injection for the Master's Bow. Still need to work on those parses a little bit there. Expect a video coming up soon concerning whether the Master's or the VMA bow is going to be best. And then obviously we have Minor Force through Rearming Trap. So we have those three dots right there. What Liquid Pony basically did, basically tested out, was that Rending Slashes, if you were to use it, it was a little bit stronger, but not really enough to really make that big of a difference in your overall DPS. I believe he ended up with about a 3% higher DPS running Rending Slashes on a very simple, just do 10 spambles and replace one with Rending Slashes. And so a lot of us have been taking a look at, well, if we're not running Rending Slashes, maybe two-handed builds are going to be equal to or better than our dual wield builds, because one of the main reasons why we were running dual wield builds was because Rending Slashes was a pretty potent bleed, as well as using Whirling Blades as a sort of quasi-execute for those classes that don't really have an execute to begin with. Two-handed, on the other hand, while two-handed does have a dot through carve, much like Rending Slashes, it's not really going to be worth running. So the real advantage of running a two-handed build is the fact, and this is going to vary a little bit depending on class, is the fact that you basically have to run sharpened on your two-handed front bar in order to meet a penetration cap. And some classes do have some sort of magic damage associated with their ultimates. So for example, Stam Sorks and Stam DKs, their class ultimates deal magical damage, also they scale off of spell penetration rather than physical penetration. So running a sharpened front bar two-handed will give you some additional spell penetration that you wouldn't get from running a dual wield. In addition, Wrecking Blow is actually a pretty strong spammable, and Executioner, while in the beginning is not quite as strong as Whirling Blades, does end up being just as strong as Whirling Blades eventually as you start to get lower and lower health, but most importantly, it's easier to sustain. What we have found during all of this is that it is getting harder to sustain on DPS, whether that's Magicka or Stamina. Chances are you're probably going to have to shift over to not necessarily parse food, but regen food. So that would be your Dubious Command Thrones, Artem Thickway Broth, a Clockwork Tristis Fillet, Witchmother's Potent Brew, moving into Dragonhold. Unless you're in a very, very organized raid group, you're just going to need that extra sustain, and that's kind of another area where two-handed builds particularly shine, because Executioner is a lot easier to sustain than Whirling Blades. But enough about that, let's go ahead and take a look at the parses. So I did do several parses. I did them... Oops, I did not bind comment metrics to the right keybind here. Didn't bind it at all on this character. So, I'm back to our parses here. So, for the bear, so this is the Warden, I did 2 parses on each, just to kind of get an idea of how stable it is, also testing out new rotations and things like that. For the dual wield build, 79.5 and 80.3k here. And then for the two-handed build, we pulled just shy of 79 and 78.4. So a little bit lower, but this is to be expected because pretty much all of our damage comes scales off of physical penetration. So that's kind of what we expect. I expected at the very least from Wardens, that two-handeds are pretty much not going to really make or break things, but the gap is very, very small. So small, in fact, that you can probably say this is pretty close to sort of trial and error, to say within just your standard errors and things like that. So pretty strong overall. Two-handed's definitely got a passive buff just to do changes to rending slashes. But really quick, looking at Executioner here, you can see our max was 122.2k versus rending slashes here, or not rending slashes, Whirling Blades here with the max of 87. So Executioner does end up being stronger as you get to lower and lower damage thresholds, or health thresholds, I should say. Next, I did them on Sorks. This is the two-handed build, so as you know, Sorks, Stam Sorks, you don't really have a class spamble. You have Bound Armaments, which is nice, but not really a class spamble, so I'll use Wrecking Blow and Executioner here. Both 85k, almost 85k flat with the two-handed, and 83.3k with the dual wield. So here we use Rapid Strikes and Whirling Blades. We did not use Rending Slashes here. And so you can see Rapid Strikes, not that bad. Both Rapid Strikes and Wrecking Blow do have channeled a channel time, so pretty similar in that regard. Wrecking Blow gives you Empowered. Rapid Strikes gets you some additional execute damage when you get below 25% health through the dual wield passives. So each of them have their own sort of benefits and drawbacks here. But as you can see here, well, the benefit of Executioner being so much stronger really sort of shines here. At 138 is our maximum, versus Whirling Blades is capped out at 94.5. And you can see we use 23 Whirling Blades on this parse, and here we use 24. So we're using them at around the exact same health threshold, getting about the exact same amounts out. And so it seems like two-handed definitely has closed the gap for some classes, and is actually looking like it's actually stronger than dual wield on other classes. So for example, Stam Sorks, what I've been seeing is that two-handed is actually outbeating dual wield on a lot of Stam Sork parses. On some other classes, I've seen Necromancer parses where two-handed is performing quite admirably. It's pulling blow to blow with dual wield, as we saw here with the Warden build. Very, very close, about 1k difference overall, which is pretty much within margin of error. So at this point, I don't think it really matters which way you go. You can go with a two-handed, or you can go with dual wield. If you're going dual wield, clearly you're obviously going to need to farm for two weapons, so it might just be better just to run two-handed, because then you don't have to farm for two weapons, you don't have to spend twice as many transmutes. You just got to get that one weapon, you just got to spend those 50 transmute stones, and that's pretty much it. So while the two-handed is not necessarily going to have the highest DPS ceiling for all classes, the gap between two-handed and dual wield has shrunk enough that I would say just run a two-handed build if you don't want to farm for more transmutes or farm for that second dual wield. It's just a lot easier. All you need to do is just get a battle axe. Even a great sword is pretty decent, and you're pretty much good to go with a two-handed build. So quite a big change here. Probably an unintended consequence of all the dot nerfs that DOS decided to do in Dragonhold. But that concludes this video. Let me know down in the comment section below whether you are, with this sort of news, whether you're going to be running two-handed builds on your stamina DPS. Again, it's not necessarily going to have the highest DPS ceiling, but the gap is so close now that you might as well run two-handed, because two-handers, you get some pretty nice shields through Brawler. But that concludes this video. Hope you guys found this informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.